The last notes of an extraordinarily beautiful melody faded away, and everyone present froze, as if enchanted, still under the impression of the astonishing, stirring song. Silence reigned in the hall, which, just moments later, erupted into loud applause and exclamations of admiration. Luis snapped out of his stupor, quickly jumped to the makeshift stage, and offered his hand to help the singer descend. The girl, who had just sung so beautifully and inspiringly, smiled shyly. Her cheeks flushed with a rosy tint, but her eyes sparkled like stars. How could I have missed this before? A thought flashed through the young man's mind. Such an angel. And I didn't notice. That evening, his dreary life with its monotonous, gray routine suddenly took on new colors. After the death of the last close relative, it had seemed as though nothing good would ever happen again. Loneliness had weighed heavily on him with its suffocating, melancholic burden, cutting him off from the outside world, constantly reminding him of its presence, never letting him relax. Even in the midst of a loud, cheerful company, he felt its cold breath on his neck. It had been almost a year since Luis's father passed away. Almost a year since he was left completely orphaned. His mother had died even earlier. Back then, as an 11-year-old, impressionable and emotional boy, he had struggled for a long time with the irreplaceable loss, retreating into himself and unwilling to show others the vulnerability and fragility of his young soul. His father, a natural phlegmatic, had always been incapable of showing emotions. And now, left alone with his son in a huge, empty house, he was completely lost. Trying to cope with his own emotional suffering and having no idea how to approach the boy, who had distanced himself from everyone, he convinced himself that his son needed a woman's care and a complete family. Fortunately, the successful businessman, the owner of a large construction firm, had never lacked attention from the opposite sex. And just a year later, the man married a statuesque brunette, Chloe, who had a son, Derek, from her first marriage, almost the same age as Luis. Apparently, the head of the family hoped that the stepbrother and new mother would help the boy emerge from his state of depression. But his hopes were only partially realized. The woman, indeed, initially treated her stepson with proper attention, but he categorically refused to accept her as a replacement for the mother who had left his life too soon. And how could he? His mother had been calm and gentle, always listened, tactfully gave advice, and helped him make decisions. But Chloe was her complete opposite. Harsh and quick-tempered, she insisted on imposing her opinion and forced him to do everything the way she thought was right. However, she didn't show the same intense attitude toward her own son. Over time, it became noticeable that she was constantly favoring her son Derek, pampering him, and indulging all his whims. The father tried to intervene, hoping to restore peace and balance to the family. But Chloe had already established her own rules in the house, considering herself the rightful mistress, and reacted aggressively to any attempts to interfere with her domain. After another argument about this, the husband gave up and stopped getting involved in household matters. Trying to escape unpleasant thoughts, he threw himself into work. He rarely came home, and only occasionally, late at night, would he visit Luis's room. With a guilty look, he would sit on the edge of the bed and awkwardly try to start a conversation, asking casual questions about his studies and mood. Derek's growing needs were met instantly and unconditionally. Derek wanted super sneakers like those of a famous actor. Done. The latest model of a phone? Off to the store we go today. Luis wasn't exactly refused everything, but he simply didn't need as many things, toys, and gadgets as his stepbrother. Derek ruthlessly used, broke, and discarded them. Luis was content with books and a computer. By the time they reached adulthood, two completely different young men were living under one roof. One was a rich kid and partygoer, a regular at nightclubs and youth parties. The other was calm and serious, interested in real life, not the artificial one. He dreamed not of consuming, but of creating. However, both stepbrothers enrolled in the same university, the Faculty of Economics. Luis found the field interesting, he considered it promising and full of potential. As for Derek, his mother simply pushed him into it, assuming that sooner or later he would have to join the family business. Although Derek was doing poorly in his studies, the woman already saw him as a future businessman. The father tried to teach his students his trade. He patiently explained everything, but only Luis showed real interest. For Derek, the whole thing seemed boring, and he was constantly shirking. The irregular work schedule, years of no vacation, and internal struggles had taken a toll on the head of the family's health. The man now looked terrible, but he kept his composure and never admitted to the fatal diagnosis. Only after he had completely fallen ill did his stepmother truly panic. It finally dawned on her that the family's financial situation could drastically change, and not for the better. At her persistent urging, the husband just wearily waved her off. Everything had already been arranged. Everyone would receive according to their merits and abilities. Luis took his father's death very hard. The lavish funeral was attended by many people, neighbors, business partners, employees, and acquaintances. Everyone who knew him even a little wanted to pay their respects and bid farewell to the deceased, always serious, reserved, but kind-hearted and decent in life. At the sight of the crowd, frozen in silent respect, Luis was breathless. He had always loved and respected his father, and was sure that his father loved him too, in his own way. But only now did he realize the important role his father had played in his life. From now on, he was alone in the world. His stepmother wore an elegant morning dress with black lace, theatrically dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief in front of people, patiently waiting for the reading of the deceased's will. Derek was disappearing into some noisy company, celebrating his long-awaited inheritance. But things didn't go as they had hoped. According to the will, the entire business was passed on to Luis. Chloe was to inherit the house and became the chairwoman of the supervisory board of the construction company. In reality, the position was ceremonial, her vote was advisory and had no real impact. Most likely, her father wanted to ensure she had a lifelong income in the form of a salary. Derek, on the other hand, inherited his father's car and, as a hint or mockery, a 3-volume finance guide by a famous foreign economist. It was impossible to miss the fury in his stepmother's eyes after the will was read. The woman turned crimson, and it seemed as though steam was about to pour out of her ears. Chloe had never doubted that her husband would divide the business equally between the two boys. But this... She turned her twisted, angry face toward her stepson, and he could physically feel her hatred. She had never felt any particular affection for Luis, but now she truly despised him. If before he had been merely an annoying inconvenience, now he had become an insurmountable obstacle to the desired inheritance. Derek, for his part, didn't even try to hide his frustration. He muttered a few curses, turned, and left, slamming the door behind him with force. The last fragile bridge between Luis and the people he had lived alongside for many years collapsed and fell into the abyss. He quickly moved out from under the same roof as his family and threw himself completely into work. The company's future now depended entirely on him, and that was an enormous responsibility. The business was running smoothly. Both employees and investors knew the young heir well and trusted him completely. Chloe appeared in the office from time to time, strolling through the rooms with an air of importance and offering unnecessary comments, pretending to understand all the issues. Luis patiently endured these visits, listening to his stepmother in silence, and continued working in the way he deemed best. By that time, the company had reached the peak of its capabilities, but it still held its ground firmly. Suddenly, a large, promising foreign investor appeared on the horizon, and everything turned upside down. Luis became excited by the idea of expanding his father's business on a global scale. In his father's memory, he wanted to reach an entirely new level and, at the same time, prove to himself that he was worthy and capable on his own. For several months, Luis negotiated and prepared contracts. Day and night, he designed, calculated, wrote, spoke, and argued. Finally, the representatives of the investment company decided to make a personal visit to ensure that all the requirements were met and to settle the final details before signing the documents. Luis understood, if everything worked out, it would be an incredible breakthrough for the company. This thought excited him greatly. Wanting a guaranteed result, he began to gather information about the future partner. It turned out that the unique feature of this corporation was its emphasis on family values. The concept of family as the foundation of life was promoted at all levels. Family traditions were cherished sacredly. Employees were even given additional days off so they could spend time with their loved ones. Luis thought for a moment. It would be wonderful if he could attend the meeting with his wife or at least his fiancée. But Serena, with whom he had been dating for the last 6 months, couldn't handle his intense work schedule and left after a burst of emotions. The breakup didn't upset him much. For some reason, all of his relationships followed a similar pattern. Everything was perfect at first, but after a month and a half or 2 months, problems, complaints, and scandals began. All the women wanted him to make money while also being constantly available, entertaining his girlfriend, taking her on vacations, and showering her with expensive gifts. In none of them did he see a loyal life companion who would stand by him through both good and bad times. Therefore, he ended these relationships easily and without pain. Finding a new girlfriend in 2 days was unrealistic. Of course, there was a whole market of escort services, but it wasn't hard to see through the representatives of such agencies. If the venture failed, it would surely harm the deal. He didn't want to take too many risks. A soft knock on the door pulled the young man out of his intense thoughts. A young cleaning lady peeked into the office. "Luis, when would be a good time for me to clean in here?" Mia had only recently started working at the office, but she had already earned a good reputation among the employees. Luis was genuinely surprised by how such a pretty, statuesque young woman with good manners ended up in such a low-status position. Normally, there was never time to delve into details, but now, in such a hopeless situation, he was ready to consider any options. The idea came to him instantly. "Mia, please come in and have a seat," he offered, pulling out a chair for her and studying the young woman intently. Her light brown shiny hair was neatly styled into a bun, and her pale, porcelain-like face had well-defined features. Her lively eyes sparkled with intelligence and kindness, qualities that are becoming increasingly rare these days. Her modest, simple attire hinted at significant financial difficulties. The girl shrank under the long, intense gaze of the young man. "Mija, I have a proposal for you," said Luis matter-of-factly. The girl's eyes blinked in fright. The unexpected interest of the director in her humble persona both puzzled and alarmed her. "Actually, it's more of a big request," he quickly corrected himself, noticing the effect his words had. "No, let me put it this way, I need your help, Mija." She immediately calmed down and asked, "What do you need, Luis? Should I clean somewhere?" The young man hesitated for a moment, gathering his thoughts and trying to find the right words, but unable to come up with a way to phrase his request, he blurted out, Mija, I'm asking you to be my girlfriend for one evening. The maid raised her eyebrows in surprise. The phrase sounded so rude and ambiguous that the young man immediately felt embarrassed and rushed to smooth things over. You see, Lewis began to explain with fervor. In 3 days, a delegation from a major investment fund is arriving. There's an informal meeting scheduled at a restaurant, and I absolutely need to be with a partner. Not just any partner, but specifically with a fiancée. Do you understand? Mija watched him with a hint of skepticism, trying to figure out whether he was joking or not. I'm begging you, he said, his eyes pleading. Please play along with me. It's just for one evening. But why me? She blurted out, a completely reasonable question. He looked at her with his sincere eyes and decided to lay all his cards on the table. There's no time to search for someone, and frankly, I don't want to. I'd rather spend a couple more days working on the contract than looking for someone for an evening. But there's the secretary, and several girls in the accounting department, the maid insisted. Lewis imagined his fiancée first as his secretary, Vanessa, whose intentions were written all over her face. Then, he imagined 2 chubby accountants, and smiled. You're the most suitable for this. Besides, I think you could use the quarterly bonus. Surprisingly, Mija appreciated his frankness. All right, she said decisively. I'm ready to play along. What do I need to do? This question caught Lewis off guard. He shrugged and said, Probably need to go to a store and buy you an outfit suitable for the occasion, a dress, shoes, what else is there? The girl blushed awkwardly and lowered her gaze, hiding her feet, clad in worn-out old sneakers, under the chair. Oh, come on, Lewis. I have a dress. I still have it from my graduation. First of all, get used to addressing me informally and calling me Lewis, he interrupted her, otherwise they'll figure us out too quickly. And secondly, the fiancée of the head of a major construction company should be dressed accordingly. Sorry for being blunt. At the shopping center, Lewis deliberately chose the most luxurious boutique and, with great difficulty, dragged the girl inside to hand her over to the salesperson. Upon seeing the expensive outfits, Mija alternated between blushing and paling, but she obediently went into the fitting room. When she timidly peeked out of the booth a few minutes later, Lewis even stood up in amazement. She looked like a completely different person. In an elegant dress, high heels, and with her hair let loose from the tight bun, the girl was stunning. The image came together so naturally, as if she had always dressed this way. There was no trace left of the modest maid. Before the director stood a young woman from high society. She would not have been out of place at any event, even one of the highest level. A prestigious foreign car with tinted windows pulled up to the restaurant, where a private small hall had already been reserved. 2 men in solid suits and a tall, primly dressed middle-aged woman with glasses stepped out. Lewis, arm in arm with his contract fiancée, was already waiting for the distinguished guests at the entrance. Hello, very glad to meet you. Allow me to introduce my fiancée, Mija. Oh, Mija, the foreigners greeted, nodding and shaking their hands. Right next to them, the stepmother was swirling around. All decked out and fully made up, she was trying to appear like an important person. Lewis didn't let on that he was surprised by her appearance. Most likely, the entrepreneurial woman had her own spies in the office, ready to inform her of any movements of the boss. Chloe, as always, carefully watched every one of his movements, waiting for the moment when he would make a mistake so she could grab the opportunity and take control of her late husband's company. I'm Chloe, Lewis's mother, she introduced herself to the guests with a smile, trying to flatter them. Stepmother, he corrected her calmly. Ignoring the biting remark from her stepson, she continued, I'm the head of the supervisory board of the company, Louis, and I share, and this is my second son, Derek. He's also a future businessman, graduating with honors from university. She chattered so quickly that the translator could barely keep up. Louis just grunted, watching the pitiful efforts of his relatives and their bowing before the investors. He hoped that this one-man show would soon come to an end, but it was in vain. For the next hour, the stepmother stuck to the foreign guests like glue, constantly spinning tall tales about how she had helped her late husband build the business, while never missing an opportunity to undermine Louis and Mija, whom he had introduced as his fiancée. Mija comes from a wonderful family, Chloe suddenly declared, probably remembering she had seen Mija in the office with a mop in her hands. She received a flawless education and speaks Spanish beautifully. Actually, she can even sing for you. Let's ask her. She clapped her hands, urging everyone to join in. Louis tried to intervene, but Chloe pushed him aside and didn't let him say a word. The British guests became excited, eager to hear the noble fiancé sing. We're all waiting, the woman exclaimed with a bloodthirsty grin, nudging Mija toward a small stage. Chloe was eager to publicly humiliate Mija. How dare a mere maid suddenly appear in high society and even help her bitter enemy? Louis was completely at a loss, not knowing how to get out of the unpleasant situation. Poor girl, he thought, his temples pounding. She must be terrified. But to his surprise, Mija calmly and confidently approached the DJ and whispered something in his ear. A melody from a famous movie began to play. The girl brought the microphone to her lips, and the deep mezzo-soprano tones of her voice filled the room. The guests, as if enchanted, listened to the beautiful song and quietly hummed along. The men took out their smartphones and filmed the entire scene. Louis, struck speechless by the scene, stood frozen in place, unable to take his eyes off the beautiful, talented girl before him. She, like a diamond, revealed new facets of herself with each note, her extraordinary, dazzling brilliance captivating him. All the listeners were thrilled by this unexpected surprise. They approached the singer and expressed their sincere admiration. The girl, flushed with pleasure, bowed and thanked them for their compliments. Only the pale Chloe glared with fury from her black eyes and, in a fit of anger, shouted for everyone to hear. She's not his fiancée at all. She's just a maid from our office. But this statement had the opposite effect. The British guests either didn't understand her or took her words as a joke. They began enthusiastically praising how talented the technical staff here were. Chloe became utterly enraged and stormed out of the hall, leaving without even saying goodbye. Derek leisurely followed her, casting a heavy, unfriendly glance at his stepbrother. So, what now? He asked his mother once they were outside. Nothing's worked out yet, she huffed, trying to calm down. He got away with it, the scoundrel. But don't worry, Derek, I'll think of something else. Sooner or later, we'll succeed. Derek frowned and clenched his fists in anger. That's it, I'm done, he growled at his mother. I've had enough of your brilliant ideas. We need to act decisively. He added firmly, I'll take matters into my own hands. With that, he turned and walked toward his car. What are you planning, son? Chloe called after him. But Derek didn't even glance back. He now knew exactly what to do. His mother lacked the courage, but he would do it. The rest of the evening at the restaurant proceeded in a friendly atmosphere. Now nothing interfered with the business discussions between the potential partners. The young director went over all the issues that concerned both him and the investors, and the guests gave their final approval for the future deal. Luis didn't take his car today so that he could have a couple of glasses of wine with the guests to celebrate the success of their joint venture. So, after saying goodbye to the satisfied foreigners who left tipsy, he took a taxi and decided to personally see Mia home. Sitting next to her in the back seat, he felt an extraordinary sense of excitement. No girl had ever stirred such feelings in him before. The gentle natural scent of her hair, her graceful profile, the accidental touch of her shoulder when the car made a sharp turn, all of it overwhelmed him at once, leaving him unable to collect himself. No, even that's not right. Only now did he feel like himself. It was in this state, beside this girl, that he felt real, strong, confident, and he liked himself like this. By the entrance, the young people stood in silence for a while, looking at each other and reading their thoughts in the eyes opposite. Neither of them wanted to part. Some thin, invisible thread connected them, preventing them from breaking the distance that had settled between them. "Mia, can I ask you a question?" The guy finally decided to break the silence. "Of course," she replied kindly. Luis felt a shiver run down his spine from her smile and velvety voice. "You're so young, beautiful, educated. Why are you working as a cleaner?" She laughed in response. "Thanks for the compliment, of course, but I finished an ordinary school. I've always had a knack for languages, and I used to go to a vocal club, even won at a regional competition." She suddenly fell silent and continued with sadness. "But seriously, my older sister is seriously ill. A year and a half ago, she broke her hip, and the bones won't heal. Now she can barely move with crutches." She sighed heavily. "We're waiting for our turn for a joint prosthesis. Disability payments aren't enough for anything." "And where are your parents?" he asked. "They passed away 2 years ago. They were elderly." "I'm their late child," she replied, paused, then added. "So, I had to look for work right after school." "Well, where will they take someone without education?" "You know." The guy immediately noticed. "You didn't forget? We agreed to be on a first-name basis." Blushing and feeling embarrassed, she timidly said, "I thought that was only for tonight." Luis took her hand and quietly said, "I would really like this to be forever." The narrow, fragile palm of this strong-willed girl was warm and pleasant to the touch. The young man pressed it to his lips and felt a tender, girlish shiver. "See you tomorrow," he whispered to Mia, making a huge effort to let go of her. "Goodbye," she replied, looking back with a deep sense of regret in her gaze, before disappearing into the building. Mia rushed into the apartment and, as soon as she stepped through the door, called out in an anxious voice, "Kirby, I'm home. Are you okay?" From the bedroom came the reply, "Hi, dear. Everything's fine." Her older sister was sitting in bed with a lamp, holding a book. Nearby, by the bed, stood crutches, the eternal companions of the young woman for some time now. In reality, reading wasn't going well. The letters jumped over each other, preventing her from grasping the meaning of the sentence, while her mind was tense, awaiting her younger sister's return from this strange evening. Only when the front door slammed could she finally breathe a sigh of relief. Her eyes immediately noticed the extraordinary excitement on Mia's face, her shining eyes and the happy smile she couldn't hide. "Tell me how it went," she said, setting the book aside. There was quite a large age difference between them, and Kirby had always been more than just a sister. She was a sister, a mother, and a friend all at once. Mia could share anything with her, even the most intimate secrets, knowing she wouldn't be judged or betrayed. And 2 years ago, when their elderly parents passed away one after another, they became even closer, practically becoming one whole. Mia laughed and even shyly covered her face with her hands, then lowered them and blurted out, "I think I'm in love." And hid again. "Who's the lucky one?" Kirby asked, smiling as she gently embraced her younger sister. She reminded her so much of herself when she was young. "Luis. Luis," she whispered, as though afraid someone might overhear her secret confession. "I think it's mutual. He's so the best." The sisters hugged and laughed happily together. In the morning, Luis woke up feeling an unusual, extraordinary lightness and relaxation, as if he had found something long lost but very dear to his heart. The constant tension and stiffness had left his body, and the expectation of trouble and problems had disappeared from his soul. The early rays of the sun were peeking through the window, promising a beautiful day. He stretched lazily and remembered the previous evening. A sweet image appeared before his eyes. Mia. An amazing girl. How skillfully she had avoided the traps set by the restless stepmother. And what talent and potential were hidden in this fragile, modest girl. These thoughts made his heart warm. Although it was still too early, Luis quickly jumped out of bed, drank a cup of coffee in one go, and got ready for work. Even the elevators seemed to be moving too slowly today. In his excited mood, he had no patience to wait, so he couldn't resist and rushed down the stairs on foot. He wasn't running, he was flying. It felt as though wings had grown behind him, carrying him forward, toward love. Yes, love. This feeling, unexpectedly, had completely taken over his heart and mind. Work, ambitions, everything else had faded into the background. He sat in the driver's seat, started the engine, and glanced at the clock. There was still over an hour before the office opened. But he could no longer stay still. He needed movement, he wanted to release the energy that had built up inside him. So, Luis sped toward the bypass road. The stretch of road was still completely empty, the highway climbing upward almost to the horizon, disappearing into the greenery of the trees. His foot pressed firmly on the gas pedal, but the speed didn't feel fast enough. His head was filled with joyful thoughts. Now he would release his energy on this stretch, then turn into the city at the exit, drive straight to Mia's house, and wait for her at the entrance. She would be surprised and happy. He clearly felt the mutual connection from her yesterday. This idea delighted him, and he wanted to speed up even more to reach his destination faster, hoping to catch her before she went to work. At high speed, he approached the junction, and, afraid of missing it, sharply hit the brakes. But the brake pedal didn't respond and suddenly sank into the void. Everything happened in the blink of an eye, and it was too late to avoid the danger. The last thing he remembered was the fast-approaching ravine. And then, darkness. Chloe, in a brand-new business suit that fit her perfectly and with her hair styled meticulously, entered the office with a confident stride. Behind her followed Derek, swaggering with a self-satisfied expression. In such a formal outfit, a three-piece suit and a tie, no one had ever seen him here before. All the employees froze, waiting for an official announcement, as rumors about the fate of the young director had spread since yesterday, but no one knew the full story. "Good afternoon, everyone," the woman proclaimed loudly. "You've probably already heard about the terrible tragedy that has befallen our family. Luis was in an accident and is now in intensive care, in a coma." She briefly displayed an expression of otherworldly sorrow on her face, then dramatically applied a tissue to her completely dry eyes. After waiting for the proper pause of courtesy, Chloe returned to her speech. "But life goes on," she declared in a cheerful tone. "The business must not suffer under any circumstances, and you must not lose your jobs." Emphasizing the last phrase, she looked around at the people present and said with significant pathos, Therefore, as the chairwoman of the supervisory board, I proposed appointing Derek, Louise's brother, as the acting director until the situation is clarified. And my proposal was supported. So, please, welcome him, she said grandly, waving her hand toward her son. There was a deathly silence. Mia, who had refused to believe the rumors until the very last moment, stood shocked, her eyes wide open. Could this really be true? Louise, who had gently held her hand and looked into her eyes just the day before, was now in the hospital. Now, back to work. Chloe clapped her hands, urging everyone to begin their tasks, and immediately approached the cleaner. Except for you. You're fired, she said triumphantly, her black eyes gleaming. Fired? Why, the girl exclaimed. She hadn't expected such a turn of events. Chloe gave her a scathing look and said with a smirk, "We don't need imposters or actresses here. You can sing somewhere else." With heavy steps, Mia trudged home, stumbling along the way. A stone of anxiety and confusion had settled in her chest. She had no idea what to do next. Her entire world had crumbled in an instant. She would have to look for a new job again and accept poorly paid work. Again, she would have to get used to a new team. And most importantly, she didn't know what would happen to Louise and the beautiful connection that had just begun between them. Louise. Kind. Sweet. Some inner impulse made her stop and radically change her route. Her legs seemed to carry her toward the hospital. An irresistible desire to see the young man, even in such a helpless state, had taken over. At least just to catch a glimpse of him. She had overheard in the office that Louise had been taken to the 4th Clinical Hospital. And she followed the call of her heart. Mia felt as though she had to be by his side, that his life somehow depended on her. This burning sensation overwhelmed all other thoughts and emotions, giving her strength. However, when she tried to enter the intensive care unit, they refused her entry outright and wouldn't even discuss the patient's condition. "Miss, all information is only for relatives," they repeated, "both the doctors and nurses, those are the rules." "What if I'm his fiancée?" Mia tried to find a loophole, but she received a clear, unyielding answer. "Only relatives, no fiancés." "Please" didn't work either. The girl sighed heavily and turned toward the exit. Her eyes unexpectedly caught a notice printed on a piece of paper, "Urgently requires a nurse for the intensive care unit. Please contact the HR department." There it was. Fate was kindly offering options and opportunities, pointing her in the right direction on this difficult journey through life. This is exactly what I need, the girl thought, feeling a spark of hope, and set off to find the right office. On her way home, doubt crept back into her heart, and sadness and worry pressed down once again. Kirby immediately sensed something was wrong when she saw Mia enter. She hobbled to the hallway on her crutches and gently embraced her sister. Mia finally gave in to her tears, sobbing loudly and painfully. From the broken fragments of words, the young woman could barely understand what had happened. "Don't cry, Mia, where would you have gone?" She comforted her younger sister. "You did the right thing. If your heart told you that, then it must be so. Everything will be fine." But Mia just kept crying, her face buried in her beloved sister's warm shoulder. How wonderful it was that she had Kirby. The new job was much harder than the previous one. Most of the time, Mia had to wash, wipe, and care for the patients, endless containers of disinfectants, special equipment, bedpans. And, most of all, the heavy feeling in her soul from the sight of suffering people, which, at first, caused horror and deep shock. The salary was also significantly lower than in the office. But Mia didn't complain. The team was friendly and welcoming. And although she was initially assigned the most unpleasant and difficult tasks, it turned out to be a usual rite of initiation for newcomers, a medical prank, so to speak. Only the most responsible and resilient could work in intensive care. The work in this department left no room for slowness, laziness, sloppiness, or indifference. Mia passed the test and was accepted into the strong medical family. It was an entirely different world, radically different from the one outside the clinic walls. Here, every minute was a battle for a human life, and saving it was considered an ordinary, everyday task. Doctors, like wizards, with a special mindset, ready to react instantly to any extraordinary situation. Nurse fairies, diligently rushing through the wards with 4 stands and a heap of syringes and medications. Mia was happy to be part of such an honorable and noble cause. But what brought her the most joy was that she could now often stop by the 3rd ward, where Luis lay. Seeing him in such a helpless state for the first time, the girl couldn't hold back her tears. Pale as death, with dark blue circles around his eyes, immobilized and seemingly lifeless. The only indication that the young man was alive were the readings on the nearby monitor, which was quietly beeping. Traumatic brain injury and, as a result, coma, whispered Gwen, the blonde nurse, to the new orderly who was standing still by the patient's bed. "How long can it last?" asked Mia in a hoarse voice. "I don't know," shrugged Gwen, "no one knows. There are cases where people lie like this for years. Sometimes they just die." Noticing that Mia's lips were trembling after these words, she asked, "Is he your friend?" "Fiancé," the girl replied unexpectedly, even to herself, and sniffled. Gwen sighed sympathetically and, in a friendly manner, tightly squeezed the poor bride's shoulder. "Hang in there, dear. And talk to him, talk to him. They say they can hear everything." Following this advice, the young orderly spent all her free time by Luis's bedside. At first, she didn't know what to say to a person who couldn't answer, or maybe didn't hear anything at all. Mia just talked about what had happened at the office after the accident, about her new job. Gradually, she got used to this one-sided communication. She wanted to tell him about herself and her family, to pour her heart out. Neither Chloe nor Derek showed up at the hospital. Maybe they were checking on the patient's condition by phone, or maybe they just decided that if something happened, they would be informed. A week passed very quickly. The new orderly settled into her work, and everything went smoothly in her capable hands. More and more often, Mia caught herself thinking that she felt like a fish in water here. Even back in school, when choosing a profession, she couldn't decide. The new job brought her new experience and a new perspective. Maybe this is her calling, to help people and ease their suffering? Yes, she wants to dedicate her life to medicine. The phone call from Chloe was a big surprise. The girl didn't immediately realize who she was talking to. "Mia, darling," Chloe purred with an unusually affectionate tone, as if nothing had ever happened. "Why haven't you been coming to work?" "As far as I remember, you fired me," Mia replied in confusion. "Oh, no," Chloe exclaimed, "maybe I said something out of turn when I was upset, but you can understand me. My son is in a coma." She loudly and theatrically sniffled into the phone, then casually added, "Come back to work tomorrow. We'll count these days as paid vacation. The new management cares about its employees." Mia immediately realized that something was off here, otherwise, why such pleasantries from the Iron Lady? So her response was clear and firm. "Thank you for the offer, but I've already found a new job and I don't plan to return." "I'm so sorry," a disappointed sigh came through the phone. "Well, at least come pick up your final paycheck. Tomorrow at 12. 12 is not convenient for me. I'm asking you very much," the woman insisted, exactly at 12. There's also the bonus for the last quarter. Although Mia understood that Chloe had something planned, the money was really needed. Fine, she reluctantly agreed, I'll come tomorrow. With a fake, wide smile, Chloe greeted Mia right in the lobby, as if she were a special guest. Mia, darling, so glad to see you. She rushed to meet her. Let's go to Derek's office. Mia stopped and firmly demanded. Chloe, tell me what you need from me. Why can't I get my final paycheck from accounting? What other intrigues are there? She was very serious and made it clear that she wouldn't move without an explanation. Chloe tried to dodge again, but eventually had to admit the truth. You see, Mia, the video from that night, where you performed that song so wonderfully, reached the owner of the investment company we have a contract with. For some reason, he is eager to meet with you. He arrived on the morning flight and came straight to our office. Why does he want to meet with me? The girl asked, surprised. Well, I don't know, Chloe shrugged in confusion. I'm not good at English. In the office, where Mia was finally persuaded to go, the new boss sat in the director's chair, completely bewildered, while a tall man around 40, dressed in a luxurious light gray suit, nervously paced back and forth in front of him. Upon seeing the girl enter, the man turned towards her and froze, carefully studying her face with his sharp, light brown eyes. Hello. Mia greeted the guest from the UK. Hello, Mia, he said. Oh, sorry, I thought you were a foreigner waiting for me. She looked questioningly at Chloe. But Chloe just stared at the guest with wide, astonished eyes. Apparently, this was also a surprise for her. Yes, I've been living in the UK for quite a while, the guest admitted, but I was born and raised in Spain. When I was 17, our family immigrated to relatives who had already settled there. He stepped closer to Mia and continued to scrutinize her facial features. Amazing, he murmured, then quickly corrected himself. I apologize for such an impertinent behavior, but you look so much like my fiancée, who died in a car accident. Like 2 drops of water. He looked so touching and sincere that Mia felt sorry for him. You must have loved her very much, Mia suggested, looking at him sympathetically. Yes, he replied thoughtfully, we were so young, and the feelings were so real. You never forget something like that. We were about to get married. But fate had other plans. His eyes clouded with sadness, but he quickly regained his composure and asked, Mia, have you lived in this city long? Do you have a family? My fiancée was from another city. I never found her grave. Maybe your relatives? Yes, we've lived here our whole lives. The girl smiled. Now it's just me and my sister. No one else. By the way, an unexpected thought crossed her mind. Maybe she knows some of our distant relatives? She really wanted to help this foreigner who had carried his youthful love through the years. Come over to our place. She suggested, I'll treat you to some delicious herbal tea, and we can ask my sister. Kirby. I'm with a guest, come out. Mia called, opening the front door and gesturing for the foreigner to come in. Leaning on crutches, her sister smiled and stepped out of the bedroom, freezing in place. The guest stared at her in equal astonishment. Kirby? My God, is it really you? Kirby! He exclaimed and rushed toward the young woman. She even dropped her crutch in shock. Andrew, she breathed out and gently embraced the man who had fallen into her arms, tears in her eyes. The younger sister couldn't understand anything. Kirby, do you two know each other? She asked in a choked voice. Kirby, my love, the foreigner murmured, passionately holding the young woman with the crutch in one hand close to him. Mia's mind began to piece together fragments of a puzzle. Andrew. She had already heard that name from her older sister. Once, she had nagged her with questions about why Kirby never got married. And her sister, reluctantly, had answered the curious younger sibling that a long time ago, a guy had broken her heart, and she didn't want to go through that again. Yes, she had said that exact man's name. "Of course, we know each other," the man exclaimed. "This is my fiancée." "But what happened?" He turned to Kirby. "I thought you were dead. I was told that you and your entire family had perished." "Who told you that?" the woman asked, surprised. "My parents. Could they have lied to me?" he said in despair, grabbing his head. "How could this be?" "They never liked me," Kirby sadly stated and gave a sad smile. "I thought you had forgotten me. I wrote to you many times." "I never received any letters," Andrew shook his head. "If only I had known." Mia decided it was time to take control of the situation. She seated the couple at the kitchen table and brewed them her special tea. "Everything's ready," she said, pouring the fragrant drink into 2 cups. "You two talk, and I'll go to my room." But her older sister stopped her. "Mia, don't go, please. Stay with us." She was surprised, but gave in to the request and fetched another cup from the set. The story she heard turned out to be both surprising and dramatic. Kirby and Andrew had fallen in love back in school. Everyone around them was sure that this couple would be together for life. But Andrew's parents absolutely disapproved of his choice. They had been preparing to emigrate for a long time and kept telling their son, "Andrew, she's not the one for you. In the UK, you'll find girls from good families. We won't be able to take this girl with us anyway." The son responded to such talks quite emotionally. "How can you not understand? I love her, truly. If that's the case, I won't go anywhere. I'll stay here, with her." His parents shook their heads in disapproval and continued to try to convince him. "Son, you're still too young. You'll have 1,000 girls like Kirby." But they never managed to change his mind. It was only when their son started looking for a local university to apply to that they finally gave in. They agreed that they would leave together, and after a year, Andrew would return, get married, and take his wife with him. But after the move, communication between the lovers quickly stopped. The parents, with sad faces, informed their son of the tragedy. Kirby's entire family had died in a car accident. It was a heavy blow for Andrew. The young man fell into a depression, suffering, and wanted to go to his beloved's grave. But at first, he was not allowed due to bureaucratic delays, and then panic set in. He feared seeing a mound of clay instead of his fiancée. He wanted to preserve her image as she had been in life. A few years later, he got married, but the marriage ended very quickly in divorce. He never met a woman like Kirby again in his life. And living with a woman he didn't love became unbearable. Last year, he finally decided to come and search for the graves of his beloved and her family. But no matter how much he searched, no one knew anything or remembered the family. Andrew fell silent and gently took Kirby's hand. "Tell me, how did you live, my dear?" The young woman was quiet for a moment, sighed heavily, and shared her part of the sad story of 2 separated hearts. What she had kept deep inside for many years poured out in an unexpectedly sorrowful tale. After her beloved left, Kirby realized she was pregnant. She kept it a secret for as long as she could, never telling anyone, because she was only 16. The girl only wrote letters to Andrew abroad and patiently waited for him to come for her. After all, then all the problems would resolve themselves. But there was no news from Andrew. Kirby lost all hope and fell into despair. Had he really abandoned her? What about those words, those solemn promises? Could it be that it was all a lie? How could she trust anyone after that? And what was she supposed to do now? When her belly grew so much that it couldn't be hidden anymore, she had no choice but to confess to her parents. Kirby still remembers that terrible evening. During a family council, her mother emotionally clutched her head and heart, repeatedly lamenting, "God, what a shame! What will people say?" Her father remained silent, looking at his daughter from beneath his thick eyebrows, and this silent condemnation made her feel even worse. Finally, the head of the family spoke. "Enough crying. We're moving to another city. I've been offered a good job there." Her mother agreed eagerly and sighed with relief. It was better this way. No one would know about their family's disgrace among strangers. After moving, Kirby gave birth to a healthy little girl, and her parents persuaded her to register the child in their name, deciding to raise her as their youngest daughter. They thought it would be better this way. The young mother, confused and crushed by the betrayal of her beloved, agreed to everything they suggested. After her parents' death, Kirby often considered revealing the family secret to Mia but could never find the strength or courage to do so. And then came the injury and the disability. All confessions were postponed for later, for a better time. And only Andrew's appearance changed everything. Kirby, with a guilty look, gazed at the girl she had called her sister for the last 18 years. Large tears rolled down her reddened cheeks. "Mia, you're my daughter," she said with a trembling voice. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you before. I'm guilty before you. I love you so much. Please forgive me." The girl stared in shock at her former older sister, trying to comprehend what she had just heard. It was like thunder on a clear day. Her sister was her mother, and this unfamiliar man was her father. Andrew, stunned by such an unexpected confession from his beloved, examined the young girl sitting across from him, who looked like a younger version of Kirby. "Yes, Andrew, this is your daughter," the woman said, guessing the thoughts of her beloved. "This is unbelievable," the man whispered, still unable to fully absorb the information. All these years, not only had his fiancée been alive, but he also had a biological daughter. How much time he had lost in ignorance. How many years of family happiness had been stolen from him. For a while, father and daughter gazed at each other in astonishment, but hearing Kirby's sobs, they rushed to comfort her. "Forgive me, Mia." She wept through her sobs. "And you, Andrew, forgive me. For thinking badly of you. Forgive me, forgive me." "Oh, don't say that." They both said in unison. "We love you. Don't cry. Everything is fine." Thus, a new family was born at that table. The shift at the hospital began in a rush, and Mia was only able to get free by lunchtime. Finally, the moment she had been waiting for all morning arrived. "Luis, hi, how are you today?" the girl asked cheerfully, flying into the room. "I've missed you so much over the weekend." She had gotten used to speaking to him so easily, sometimes feeling as if he, holding his breath, listened to her carefree chatter. And sometimes she noticed the faintest trace of a smile on his face. Most likely, she had invented these signs herself, but it still felt good to think that Luis understood everything. A lot had happened in Mia's life over the past month, and she told the boy all about it in detail. How her sister had disappeared and her mother had appeared, how her father had been found. She also told him how he had taken Kirby in, how she had undergone a successful operation, and how soon she would be able to walk on her own and throw away her crutches forever. Then, they would have a real wedding, one that had been postponed for so many years. Andrew and Mia tried to convince her to come with them abroad, but when he found out who she worked for in the hospital, he immediately agreed with her, making her promise to visit as often as possible. Love conquers all, my dear. Hope and wait, he said to his daughter before his departure, gently pressing her head to his chest. Love conquers all, she repeated thoughtfully out loud and looked at Luis. A finger on his hand suddenly twitched. His eyelids fluttered open, and the patient monitor emitted a loud, urgent beeping. The girl leaned over him, holding her breath. The corners of his mouth trembled and formed a faint smile. Mia, Luis said softly. You were in my dreams. After waking up from a coma, Luis slowly began to recover, relearning how to move and walk. Mia was always by his side now, and that was the greatest happiness. The only sadness was the news that Chloe and Derek had managed to ruin the company with their clumsy, inept hands. Investors, seeing the incompetence of the new management, tore up all the contracts and started the bankruptcy process of the company. The life's work that Luis's father had carefully built over many years was destroyed in just a few months. Furthermore, another shocking fact was revealed. The investigation showed that the brake system of Luis's car had been intentionally damaged. The ongoing investigation clearly pointed to Derek's involvement in the incident. It turned out that, in his pursuit of wealth, the young man was willing to make any sacrifices, even human ones. But after achieving his goal, he couldn't even hold on to it. It was bitter for Luis to realize how people, who had once been considered family, could do such things. He couldn't hide the sadness in his eyes from his fiancée. She could feel and understand him so well. Luis, she said one day, I spoke with my father. He's ready to become a permanent investor in your new company. Do you want to rebuild everything? Start over? His burning gaze and joyful smile were the answer to her question. He was ready to start working right away. And will you be my business partner? He asked Mia. I could use your help. I have huge plans. I want to build beautiful, comfortable housing. No. She laughed. I've already decided. I'm going to medical school in the fall. I've found my place in life. I'll be healing people. How unexpected. The young man smiled, hugged his fiancée, and buried his face in her silky hair, inhaling their intoxicating fragrance. How happy he was to be with her. How much he loved her. Love conquers all, he suddenly said, and was surprised. Where do I know this phrase from? It feels like it's been stuck in my head. I keep repeating it. Mia smiled gently, wrapped her arms around his neck, and sweetly kissed her beloved right on the lips. What difference did it make? Let it remain a mystery.